Hello?
Nope, none of us are on. We're ready. Okay, perfect. It is 5:15.
Hello?
We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and welcome any of our guests, even though we don't have any yet. And if I can ask everybody to go ahead and follow along with me to read the mission and vision. We'll start with the mission. The mission of the Nampa School District is to ensure high levels of achievement for every student. And vision? Every student is fully engaged in extraordinary learning experiences, preparing for successful transition to the next stage of life. Wonderful. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, I second. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll now entertain a motion to move into executive session.
I move that we go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061F to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated. The mere presence of legal counsel at an executive session does not satisfy this requirement.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Roll call vote, please, Clerk Lamont. Aye.
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 Okay, into executive session we go. When we come out of executive session, we will move immediately into the student spotlight at 6 p.m. student
We do.
spotlight.
Yes, Keisha Hernandez. She's there. Is Keisha here?
Okay, okay, perfect. Okay, we'll wait for Trustee Kirkman and then we'll resume.
Man, I hate being blind. I can't see middle school.
This is my least favorite place for us to have meetings. And since we never know the size, but I feel like I can't, I feel like it echoes, and I feel like I can't see anything except for these lights. Like, it is so echoey. It is. Okay, welcome everybody for the second time. This meeting started earlier with an executive session, so we've actually already formally welcomed everybody. We've gone through the pledge, we've gone through the mission and vision, so we're actually going to pick right up at the student spotlight. So I am going to go ahead and ask that we have Keisha Hernandez from the Boys and Girls Club Youth as the Youth of the Year come forward. Yeah, for the Boys and Girls Club.
Good evening, Chairman Taylor and Board of Trustees and Superintendent Russell. My name is Stephanie Doobie. I'm a Vice Principal at Columbia High School. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Ms. Keisha Hernandez. Keisha is a junior at Columbia. I've had the pleasure of knowing her since 6th grade at West Middle School, and we transitioned together to Columbia. She is a wonderful young lady. At Columbia, we talk about following the Wildcat way, showing respect, responsibility, integrity, and being positive. And this young lady exemplifies that in every way. She was nominated as the Canyon County Boys and Girls Club Youth of the Year. I knew I was going to hesitate on that. And from that, she then gave a speech and was selected for the Chamber Scholarship for a full ride to the College of Western Idaho. So congratulations to Keisha. So I'll let you guys, I told her you might ask her some questions, and I wasn't sure what more you would love to know about her.
Did you get special recognition from the mayor and the city council?
Yes, I did.
Good.
I was going to say this is better. I'm just wondering what your future, what do you have planned? I mean, it sounds like you're off to a great start.
Yeah, in the fall of 2024, I plan on attending CWI and hope to study criminal justice.
Oh.
Awesome.
So Keisha, can you speak a little bit around the Boys and Girls Club? Are you involved? Do you participate? Are you a mentor now?
Yeah, I began going to the club when I was 9 years old, and I went there all through elementary school and middle school, and I now work there. So
Awesome. Great. Trustees, do we have any other questions for Ms. Hernandez?
I do. Just one more question. Do you have that one teacher that shaped your life and helped you the most? That one specific teacher that touched you in a positive way?
I would definitely say Mr. Wright, my AVID teacher. He definitely helped me a lot.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right, trustees, if there's no more questions. Oh, Trustee Simpson?
I just want to say congratulations and thanks for coming to see us today. I know we're all excited, I'll speak for all of us, to get to hear about these wonderful accomplishments and what a wonderful human being that you are, and we're so glad to have you in our schools.
Thank you
Can we
so
get another
much.
round of applause for Keisha?
Congratulations.
Thank you so much for being with us. Okay, so from student spotlight, we will go directly into trustee comments and then public comments. Trustees, we can go ahead and start with the first one who has comments, and then go left. Do I have any trustee comments this evening? No? Okay, no trustee comments, so that's gonna move us directly into public comment. So if you haven't been at the board meeting before, I'm gonna walk everybody through how this works now. So what we will do is we'll call your name, we'll have you come up, you'll take the center mic right in front of us. 3 minutes will appear on the screen. You'll have 3 minutes to give your public comment. I did receive a few emails about people attending and maybe having some hearing issues. So tonight, if somebody says something that you agree with, I'm just gonna ask you to raise your hand real high so we can still see that you agree with what's being said, but that way we can make sure there's a big echo in here. We can't get rid of it. We've tried, we've really tried. So if you agree with something that's been said, just raise your hand high in the air. We can see that hand raised. We'll know that you agree. That way we'll move through. We'll keep that disruptive noise down, okay? So right now, if I can have Stephen Childs come up to the mic, and then Morgan Allen, you will be on deck directly following Stephen. Stephen. And then Stephen, if you could just give us your name, address if applicable, and if you would prefer not to give your address, you are welcome to give your zone.
My name is Stephen Childs, and my address is 2361 West Washington Avenue, Nampa, Idaho.
Okay. All right, can we get his 3 minutes up on that board? Okay, you're ready to go.
I want to start by saying the obvious. We do not live in California. We do not live in Oregon, Washington, or Illinois. We live in the great state of Idaho. The good people of this state do not lean to the left or follow a woke ideology, nor will we choose to. We instead believe in God's given rights bestowed upon us by our Maker and the founders of this country. We believe, as the government of this great state, in the sanctity of family, that the moral standards, traditional values, and ethical principles are sovereign and will not be infringed upon. The governing body in this state recently demonstrated this to be true as it overwhelmingly passed Senate Bill 1100, House Bill 71, and Senate Bill 1187. All these have passed because of the urgent need to protect our children from a radical gender ideology that has been subvertly and deliberately forced upon the children in our cities, towns, and schools. The curriculum you have already integrated into our schools, which teaches and addresses gender identity, gender preference, and sexual preference, is exactly what I am addressing. This curriculum might as well be part of the indoctrination ideology established by the leftists of this country. As a concerned citizen of this community and as a patriot of this state and this country, I ask the question to this board. Knowing the viewpoint of the overwhelming majority of the citizens of this city and school district to whom you serve, and knowing of the laws recently passed and the requirements of these laws, are any one of you willing to defy both the law and your conscience to continue to support this curriculum? Another question to all of you, would you be okay if your 14-year-old daughter openly read the extreme controversial pornographic aspects of this curriculum to their grandmother, grandfather, or to other minor children in your household? Question 3, would you force, coerce, manipulate, or belittle any student to openly recite sexually explicit lessons, participate in, or be subject to by requiring attendance or their participation in the class in order to gain a passing grade? I, along with many parents, must ask, to what end? Why would this board choose to allow teaching to force teaching that violates so many Idaho statutes? Is it for money? If so, I call for an open audit. Is it to push and force an ideology? If so, I call for your dismissal. There is a lot at stake in this decision, so much more than most of us realize. What is most at stake is the integrity of our families, our values, and our trust. To the members of this board, to the teachers at this school or these schools, you are all on notice. There are many, many watchdogs, and we will do our due diligence to make sure that our children are educated as we see fit. Should you fail us, there will be a reckoning in the form of litigation, restraining orders,
Time.
and lawsuits.
Hold on just a sec. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Could you go back to the bills, the references that you quoted in there? That's all I need is just the 3 references. I was trying
That's
to jump.
Senate Bill 1100, House Bill 71, and Senate Bill 1187.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. On deck, we'll need to restart. I've got 3 minutes on the clock. We'll need to get that reset. I've got Morgan Allen coming up, and on deck I have, I believe, Joni McClintock. Okay, perfect. Okay, so if you can state your full name, address, if you preference not to give us your address, just your zone, and then your time will start. And thank you all for raising hands. We really appreciate that.
No problem. Ms. Morgan Allen. I live at 2014 West Swallowtail Place, Nampa. And what else was it?
You're good to go. You can
Okay.
start your speaking.
All right. I want to thank the board for the opportunity to further discuss and further discussion of the psychological gender curriculum. I would like to give some background on the planned psychological operation to destroy the family structure in this country over the past 80 years, and the men, although I won't go all the way back. And the psychologists, marketing professors, and a propaganda theorist. Let's start with the big kahuna, the so-called father of the sexual revolution, and the framer of modern sex education, Alfred Kinsey. While he's often portrayed as a saintly sex scientist, he was complicit in the sexual abuse of children. His own data table showed children as young as 2 months being, quote, stimulated to orgasm. He had data on hundreds of boys under the age of 15. He oversampled prisoners, homosexuals, prostitutes, and pedophiles, then claimed this data represented the entire population of the United States. Why is this so-called comprehensive sex ed so pervasive in our media, schools, colleges, universities? Because the man who pioneered it was bent on spreading lies and deviancies to continue the destruction of the American family and Judeo-Christianity. Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen, both homosexuals, were 2 Harvard University professors, Kirk in psychology and Madsen in marketing. In 1988, they wrote a book titled After the Ball, How America Will Overcome Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the Decade of the 90s. This book was written at the time of the AIDS epidemic, and here is what they write in their book. AIDS, though a loose cannon, is a cannon indeed. As cynical as it may seem, AIDS gives us a chance, however brief, to establish ourselves as a victimized minority, legitimately deserving of America's special protection and care. How, given the horrid hand AIDS has dealt us, can we best play it? And they go on. The campaign we outlined depends centrally upon a program of unabashed propaganda, firmly grounded in long-established principles of psychology and advertising. Their strategy: desensitizing, jamming, and conversion, and these are also the 3 steps of brainwashing. Next, we have the father of propaganda and advertising, public relations, in U.S. and all over the world, was Edward Bernays. He provided leaders the means to, quote, and control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it. He liked to call this the engineering of consent. So these psychologists were the foundation to where we are today. The truth is, the trend in our government, media, and education is the willingness to promote and protect every strange, mentally ill group, but will not protect the folks who believe in reality, truth, and that if you are normal, you're deemed a threat.
Time. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to ask Joni McClintock to head up this way, and on deck we have Larry McClintock. Joni, same thing. You'll go ahead and give us your name, address. If you prefer not to give us your address, that's totally fine. You'll give us your zone,
Okay.
and then your 3 minutes will start on the screen.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Joni McClintock, and I reside in Zone 4. Earlier today, I was going to go in a different direction than I am now. The reason why is that in regards to this class, my observation is that the majority of the trustees are not listening to the multitude of citizens who are opposed to keeping this class and our reasoning behind this, as these two gentlemen just expressed. How do you explain in our fair little city of Nampa the increase in violence, mental health issues, and was it 3 or 4 suicides among students within the last year, year and a half? How do we explain that? Even one suicide is unacceptable. When children are being taught to question who they are at the very core of their being, we are confusing them. Why should we then be surprised in the increase of these negative, destructive, undesirable behaviors? We are doing our children a great disservice when we teach them lies. So let's don't be surprised if things only get worse for our children here in Nampa. I have 13 precious grandchildren, and so I'm standing here in their behalf. I don't want them taught lies. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank Tracy Pearson and Marco Valet for going against the flow and bravely taking a stand for what is true, right, and for doing what is in the genuine best interest of the students in Nampa. You are my local heroes, and I have nothing but respect for you. Thank you for your uncompromising, diligent service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry McClintock, you are up next, and then following, I have Brian Williams on deck, and that will be our final speaker.
Hello, Larry McClintock, 1412 Lois Lane. I believe we are in Zone 5. Nampa School District offers a dual credit college level class for students. Part of the curriculum deals with a subject that has been proven to have an adverse effect on individuals who believe and personally adopt this teaching to themselves. It is the class of psychology and the subject that relates to the philosophy of transgenderism. This philosophy is utterly untrue, and teaching such lies is unthinkable and immoral. To illustrate the falsity of this teaching, let's take the argument to an extreme. Taking an argument to an extreme can prove the argument to be truth or falsehood. If the philosophy of transgenderism is true, then my feelings about one area of my physiology should transverse to and hold true to all of my feelings. I feel, and I believe sincerely, that I identify myself as a cat. I love to do things cats do. I love cat food. I feel more comfortable with my cat behaviors, and I love other cats. I am a cat. Because I believe I am a cat, you must treat me as a cat, not as a person who thinks he's a cat, or not as a real cat. You must make accommodations for me as a cat. Failure to treat me like a cat or disagree with that I am a cat means that you are hateful, hypocritical, intolerant, and a bigot. This may sound silly, but this is exactly what's teaching of transgenderism is. Transgenderism is nothing but lies, and it harms the individuals who take it to heart. According to a study by the National Library of Medicine, National Center for Biotechnical Information entitled Suicidality Among Transgender Youth, elucidating the role of interpersonal risk factors, data indicates that 82% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves, and 40% have actually attempted suicide, with suicidality highest among transgender youths. Should this dangerous topic be taught in Nampa to our children and grandchildren? Should it be taught? Why would a school district support such harmful teaching? Some call it censorship, but a lack of censorship should not prevent our schools from making moral judgments about the subjects being taught or being concerned with such subjects may affect young people and the general populace negatively. I'm interested in hearing my thoughts of my trustee. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Perfect. All right, Mr. Brian Williams, we're going to ask you to come up, and then you will be our final speaker this evening. We'll have you state your name, address. If you preference not to state your address, your zone is perfectly acceptable, and then your 3 minutes will show on the screen.
Hi, Brian Williams, Zone 5. Everyone said a lot of the important things that needed to be said this evening. I think you've seen a lot of us repeatedly coming here because we really believe in the significance of the discussion that's being had here. I really like the idea of psychology courses and the fact that kids are doing dual credits and getting these college credits, and these things are great things. I personally did all the AP courses as a kid. Kind of wish I'd done dual credits, because then I wouldn't have had to worry whether I got a 3, 4, or 5 on an AP exam for getting credit. And so I think these things are valuable, but having gone through psychology courses in the schools and the way they were formatted even 20 years ago now, I know what they had in there. I know how many things they taught back then that were lies. And that as a young person facing those lies and having an inability, either by my maturity or the perceived maturity of my instructors, or the fact that an agenda was being presented in the classroom, you are putting kids at a disadvantage, inherently at a disadvantage. As much as we want them to be exposed to different ideas, you cannot keep telling a child a lie. When I teach in an academic setting or clinical setting, every time somebody hears something wrong, it takes, on average, 7 times hearing it correctly to actually get it into your brain, that it is different than you were originally taught. It is important that we not make these mistakes and teach lies to our children about fundamental things that are as basic as male and female exist. These are important categories. They have absolute implications to somebody's life, how it's lived. We can respect. As a kid, I grew up going, you know what? Sometimes girls like to do boy things and boys like to do things that we consider girl things. That never made them boys to girls or girls to boys. Yet alone, now being asked as a healthcare professional, providing anesthesia in this valley, having to refuse to have women's breast cut off because they have dysphoria over it, or cutting off the testicles of a man, and people sitting there in a hospital referring to this person as female. You're cutting off testicles. What could be more apparent that this is a male? What have you done? You have completely ruined his ability to ever reproduce because you have encouraged his psychological disorder. We don't do gastric sleeves or bypasses on anorexic and bulimic patients because that would encourage their psychological disorder. This coursework encourages these lies and will continue to ruin and destroy people's lives. You are making a decision about how you would engage with these things and what you will expose children to. This is a chance for you to take those stands and to do the right thing. If within that course material you just simply remove these parts of it, that's at least one step. But a stand has to be taken, and your decisions in this process will demonstrate your stance on whether you really truly care about children.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay, that will conclude. We saw your hand, but we can do it again. We got you. I saw you. You held your. Listen, you did good. You stopped yourself. See, I was proud. Thank you. I really appreciate it, you guys. I really do. We can definitely see your hands, and it does help. I did receive some emails just about it is echoey in here. We get it. All right, that is going to conclude our public comment. We will move on to the consent agenda. I will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we are going to move directly to the action items.
Chair Taylor, is this on? Is this on?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Just have to talk a little closer. Chair Taylor, tonight we're going to discuss the policy, gender identity, and sexual orientation. It is policy 2050. This will be a first reading. And this was a policy that was brought forth by the administration to kind of address some of the concerns that we've heard from our community. And so I have it there in the board packet for you. There's just a couple of things I'd like to highlight with it so that it clearly could share what it covers. The first of all, it clearly covers the definitions in the district so that we clearly understand what gender identity is, what sexual orientation is, et cetera. And it clearly states in those definitions that those are something that we wouldn't teach in school. Those are things that would be for discussions in the home with parents and their families, but it would not be something that schools would discuss or teach. It also gives a definition around biological sex. What is that? So that there isn't that confusion around there. There's a definition for that in there as well, so it's clear. It describes what the facilities are going to be used and how that would be used. And so boys would use boys' bathrooms, girls would use girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, et cetera. It clearly identifies what takes place in the schools as far as the use of facilities. Mentions the same thing on school trips. There's clear guidelines around school trips when students are using or on field trips and athletic events and et cetera. Again, it provides clarity around that as well. There's clearly identifies what's on the student's permanent records, and so it clearly states that we would go off of what the birth certificate says. So a student could not want us to change their gender because it clearly states in this policy that we would use the birth certificate as the identifier for a male and identifier for a female. It also mentions the use of pronouns and the compelled speech, and I'll talk about that in just a second because there's the procedure that we had mentioned, but it essentially would say teachers cannot survey students or use pronouns in classrooms, cannot compel teachers to do those things, so that's in this policy as well. And then lastly, it allows the administration to address student needs. If students have certain needs, that they need to speak with an adult on, particularly around these topics, that they would be able to have discussions with a counselor, but it is not a place for a teacher or coach or any other adult to have those discussions. And then the counselor then would have conversations with the families about the needs of that child. So the policy there, that's the basics of it, and happy to open it up to discussions, questions, and go from there.
Perfect. Trustees, questions?
Oh, go for it. Short.
Yeah, I am going to be here a short time, so can I just ask
Absolutely.
because I have to leave at 7. So looking over the policy, first I wanted to let the community know under school athletics, we have to abide by IHSAA, Idaho High School Activities Association, in order for the school students to be able to participate in sports. And IHSAA does have stipulations that if, you can look it up, but it does talk about them allowing boys to go into girls' sports if they've gone through a year of procedures, and I think it's medications, the drugs that actually are not FDA approved for gender dysphoria. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. That's on this policy, because if we don't put it on there, the students can't participate in athletics. But moving on to policy, also there's a couple policies they listed, and there's policy 3280 that I had a question on. It's about sex, and in there it talks about sex equity. And I'm wondering, and if I'm looking at 3280, it talks about equal educational opportunities shall be available for all students without regard to race, color, national origin, ancestry, sex, ethnicity. Now, when there's sex in that policy, can we add biological sex? Are they going to have, is that going to, and right down here again in the other paragraph, it says basis of sex. So and then down even lower here, it talks about information, and they're using and referring to Title IX, which I believe has been abused, the Title IX. So I'm concerned adding that to the policy, because I see a lot of problems with 3280 being used as a loophole. I don't know, I'm just asking because that's a concern, because Title IX's listed, and I think biological sex needs to be put on here.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Pearson, That's something, and absolutely, I think we could look at. I don't know an answer, yes or no, right now without running it through legal, but I think the intent of that was to ensure that there is no discrimination. I think that's the intent of that policy. To me, it makes sense, biological sex, but that's something, again, I probably would have to double check with
Okay.
our lawyers.
And then one more, I'm sorry. So yes, that's one thing I'm concerned about passing this policy right now. And then policy 20, I know it's the draft, it's the first reading, right?
Yeah, and Chair Taylor, and Trustee Pearson, could you explain why you feel 3280 would impact policy 2050?
Because in policy 2050, we refer to policy 3280, and we also refer to policy 3295 or 90. I'm not sure. I think it's supposed to be 3290, which is in regards to sexual harassment and sex discrimination. There again, there's putting, instead of putting biological sex. I'm just worried because we're stating under policy 2050, that we're following these policies, that we're going to have a loophole there, because I feel that there's been so much abuse with discrimination and being sex, like a boy wants to be a girl or a girl wants to be a boy. There's discrimination, and it's going to fall under those 3290 and 3280 policies.
Chair Taylor and Trustee Pearson, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. I think that was kind of the intent of some of the procedures that were shared as well around the expectations that the administration would have for the staff around what they're teaching, what they're saying in classrooms and things. I don't believe that this policy, because it was run through our legal, that it would contradict that other policy. I mean, that's one of the intents, is we wanted to make sure there wasn't a discrimination against it. We wanted just clarity in the district. So again, happy to bring forward and get further guidance on that. So I thank you for clarifying that, but I don't believe that would be the case, but we can always check.
Dr. Russell, in reference to that, when you do, since it was adopted in 2017, can we also get historical information on that adoption shared with us?
Chair Taylor, sure.
Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Trustee Pearson, any more questions?
One more on the, I think one more. Superintendent Russell, you also provided us instruction in gender and sexuality instruction on the procedures of how you were going to educate your staff, and you gave us a list, which I thought a lot of it was really well written. I liked how the procedures that you want to follow to make sure the staff follows whatever policy we decide on. But I was concerned, number 6 and 7. Number 6, if a staff member has knowledge of extenuating circumstances where a student may need support to discuss items in 2050 gender, the student should be referred to a school counselor. And my question is what is there standards of care, or is there standards for this counselor if a child goes in there? So that's concerning of me. I know I asked you and you weren't kind of unsure about standards, but as a nurse and psychology major, I know that we always have standards or protocols that we follow, even if like a student comes in who's suicidal. You don't let them go willy-nilly. You have some kind of standards that they have to follow for the suicidal patient or student, as also true with a confused student who's confused gender-wise, because I would hate for this to be encouraged or confirmed, and how do we make sure that this isn't happening as well? So that was something that concerned me in the procedure, and I think that was it for now.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Pearson, thank you for clarifying that. And again, the standards, I wasn't sure if you were looking for, kind of a written document that has certain standards. The protocols that we would do is if a student was struggling with any issues in 2050, that they would talk with a counselor, and the counselor would first of all make sure that the student was safe, that there was not going to be self-harm or any suicide attempts or anything like that. If that's the case, then they need to immediately get assistance. The second thing they would do is they would work with the student to understand what the issue is. And once they notify that issue, according to Idaho law and according to district, is they would reach out to the parents and bring the parents and the family in so that the student and the family and then the counselor can have a game plan about how to move forward with that. So that's currently, we do that for this, do that for a numerous variety of things where students have issues, suicide, anxiety, mental health, depression, pregnancy, those things where initially it's making sure that students are safe, their well-being is okay, and then immediately notifying the family so that the family can come in and then they can work together on some solutions or some support going forward. And then typically there's a follow-up process as well, or sometimes a referral to outside counseling as well, depending on what the family would like.
Okay, thank you. For clarity, there is no encouragement or confirmation of gender, of how they're feeling about their gender.
Yeah, that's not the intent at all. It's really to make sure, again, that the students are protected, that they're healthy, and then after that, it's determining what the family would like to do, working with the student, and then how does the school kind of support the family moving forward through that. And sometimes that's a lot of support, sometimes that's none. If the family takes it and they deal with it and they don't inform the parents or they don't inform the school.
Right.
With that.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, a quick question, just follow up to what Trustee Pearson was asking. The standards do counselors have standards of care in their professional realm? Don't they have standards of care that they are supposed to follow? Okay.
So
And I would assume that would carry over into counselors for school districts too, for schools.
Chair Taylor and Trustee Kirkman, I asked that with our counselors, and our head counselor did not provide any. I could follow up with more clarity to see if there is like a national.
Or I think if they were
standards of care.
licensed, or if
Yeah.
they had the professional license to practice therapy or counseling or whatever, that they would have to follow those. Okay.
So do I hear a request then? I've had two trustees talk about it. So Dr. Russell, can we instruct that we look into, I would agree, some form of a standard practice? And can you share that with the board once you have it? And if the answer is one doesn't exist, that's the answer?
Yeah, Chair Taylor, happy to look at that. I think professional license standards, I could definitely, that might clarify it. Again, when I asked the question, it was around, how do you work with students that are dealing with some of the issues in policy 2050, and that was the response. So happy to look and see for those others.
And trustees, do we want to take that a step further? Just maybe a documented response, knowing what those steps or protocols are?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's a request that he can get back to us? Okay.
So, Chair Taylor, just another quick question. When Trustee Pearson and Superintendent were talking about the process, was that a document that you saw in our agenda? Because I don't.
It's the procedures
Yeah.
that were emailed to all of us.
Was it through the email then? Okay.
It was, yes.
That's what I was wondering. I mean, they were familiar. I just didn't see them in
Yeah.
the agenda, so I didn't know if they were added in there or not. Apparently not.
Yeah, item number 6 and 7 on that. So on.
Trustees? Or
go.
Trustee Pearson, are you complete?
I just want to remind everybody, all our kids are beautifully and fearfully made, and we need to remember that. We need to encourage the healthy bodies that these children were born into, and that's what we need to encourage and focus on, because the mind is a powerful tool, and we need to make sure that we're speaking truth to these children. That's why this is so imperative. And I'm just appalled that we're even having to debate such a thing. In God we trust.
Thank you, Trustee Pearson. Okay, Trustee Valle?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and I'm sorry, my deaf ear is echoing a lot for some reason, which is weird. Number 68, school facilities, that's the line, 68. Reasonable accommodations shall not include allowing access to facilities designated for use by members of the opposite sex, while members of the opposite sex are present or could be present. So if the school is closed, I'm not quite sure why that last part, while members of the opposite sex are present or could be present. To me, it should say access to facilities designated for use by members of the opposite sex shall not include allowing access at any time, basically. That's the part that I'm trying to get at. Because it says in there, while members of the opposite sex are present or could be present. What does that mean? That if we think that they're not gonna be there, there's no girls on site, that we can let a boy in there and have a bodyguard, or it kind of like leaves it kind of questionable in my head. So I want to make sure that we just close the loop on that and just say that we should not allow access to facilities designated for use by members of the opposite sex at any time.
Just to be clear so that I understand, your suggestion then would be just basically right where it says opposite sex, then it would be at any time, and then discontinue all members of the opposite.
Exactly.
Okay, got you. Did that track for all the trustees?
Yeah, but
Okay.
trustee Valier,
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 Okay.
trustee.
That really where there's any knowing by any school official that there could be individuals of the opposite sex that could use a bathroom, you cannot allow a boy to use a girl's bathroom if you have any inkling of knowing that there are girls going to be in there during athletic events or during school hours or anything like that. So the vast majority of those times, you're not going to have any ability to do that. I think it's actually a penalty against that, from my understanding of the current law. It is worded that way because of that issue that many districts don't have 2 locker rooms, and so you might need girls to be in a boys' locker room and use the boys' bathroom during halftime of the basketball game. So that's why it's worded that way, but the intent of that is clearly stated so that no district knowingly can allow boys to use girls or girls to use boys' restrooms during school hours, during school events, early in the morning, or band competitions or whatever, because if there's an opportunity for any other individual to walk in there, then it's against the law.
Hey, we're back on. Thanks.
Oh, we're fixed.
So what did you say, Dr. Russell? No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to respond. But that also brings up another question. So we do have a visiting basketball team, and maybe there is in another district an individual that identifies as an opposite sex and wants to use a bathroom that is not of their biological sex or what is stated on their birth certificate. How do we approach that? By the virtue of them playing in our district, they're subject to our policies and our rules?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, my understanding would be yes, this would be our policies, our rules underneath that. We would have to have foreknowledge of that and have that information given to us from the opposing team, community, or district. We may not have that information, though. And that's where the intent of that law is knowingly allowing that to occur is the issue. So this policy is saying that we're not going to knowingly allow that. Now, if it does occur and we do knowingly allow it, then we're breaking the law.
Violation. Okay.
Trustee Vai, back to you.
I think we can probably put something in there with the exception of athletics, because I don't want something else, like, for example, in and I don't know. I can't think of examples right now.
Dr. Russell, do you feel like you have enough understanding for the direction of wordsmithing that last sentence?
Sure. Trustee Taylor, yes, I believe we could wordsmith it or add something around athletic exceptions or something like that.
Trustee Vai, I believe that your intent was understood, and since this is a first reading, you can also do some wordsmithing with Dr. Russell in between.
Okay, so I'll keep going.
But what was that line?
Oh, it was line 68, 69, and 70.
Thank you.
School athletics, IHSAA. I don't like it. We don't think we have a choice. So we'll just have to leave it at that, but that's my thought. Line number 81 to 83, school trips.
Trustee Vai, sorry to interrupt you. Did you not want a word change there as well?
Oh.
Were we?
Well, we were going to talk about, and I did bring this up about taking that out altogether. Thank you for.
Or adding maybe the word as required by. To participate in, so that there was more understanding that we were going to leave it, but it was so that people could understand the disclaimer that Trustee Pearson had made.
Yes.
So do we want to put that down for wordsmithing as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that is 64 through 70.
Yep. No, I'm glad. Thank you for helping me with that.
That's 74.
There's so many things
76.
going on
Thank
that
you,
sometimes.
Mandy. 74 through 76. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Thank you.
Caught me by surprise.
Okay. So school trips, 81 through 83. In the event of a conflict regarding sleeping accommodations, district administration shall consult with families of the involved students to determine reasonable accommodations depending on the circumstance or situation. Can you give me examples of that? I was trying to understand that, and my head kept bringing a lot of weird examples, and I'm not getting it.
Yeah, so Chair Taylor, Trustee Vai, I think that is looking at, let's say you have a student who is identifying as a girl, and they're a boy. What this policy says is they cannot stay with girls. That is not allowed. Therefore, the district would have to reach out to the family and say, parents, family, the student cannot stay with girls. We need to find another accommodation. Are they okay to stay with boys? Are they okay to have their own lodging? What would you like, and to work with the family that way? So it's clearly a state that, again, as it states in this policy, biological sex is determined by the birth certificate, and therefore we do not break or cross that by any means.
And this goes with us no matter where the district students are at.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me keep going. I did have a question about compelled speech. Number 118, 119. Let me just read 117, 18, and 19. It is not the intent of the district or its employees to be intentionally disparaging regarding the use of specific pronouns. Forcing students or teachers to use pronouns that do not correspond with an individual's biological sex is for the individual to determine. I was wondering what that part meant, for the individual to determine, because in my head it means that the individual can force students or teachers. But teachers can't force individuals.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Vai, what that's saying is I, as a student, cannot compel you to use a pronoun that you believe is against your own thoughts or personal beliefs. That's the compelled speech. So I cannot compel you, if I wanted to be a she, to call me a she if I asked for that, or let's say I wanted to be called a they. I cannot force that upon you. So the individual teacher gets to make that decision whether they want to use that or not. Now, as I mentioned in the procedures, what we're going to ask teachers is you're not going to ask any surveys or any questions around pronouns whatsoever. And we're going to back that up by the Idaho code that's coming out around surveys and those things. So the clarity in the classrooms to all staff is you're trained to, you're not going to ask anything like that. He's or he's, she's or she's, and we're moving forward that way. If a request comes forward, then it need to be referred to a counselor and then reach out to the family, so there's that discussion. So there's a complete transparency with the family if any of these issues come up.
Okay, and said something that I think I totally agree with. Why can't we just add that? Can we wordsmith that so that we can make that a little bit clear, that if a request comes, that we refer to a counselor?
Well,
I would think we should take is for the individual to determine, just take that out, put period at biological sex. Forcing students or teachers to use pronouns that do not correspond with the individual's biological sex, period. Take out is for the individual to determine. If there's an issue with somebody not liking their biological sex pronouns, and send them to through your procedure.
Trustee Taylor, Trustee Pearson, appreciate that comment. I think we'll have to check that through legal, because we want to make sure if the family agrees to that, again, we cannot force that upon the teacher, but if a teacher agrees to do that and the family agrees to do that, I want to make sure that does not go against free speech. And so I'll have to double check, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're asking for a legal check on compelled speech first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chair Taylor.
Yes.
So again, too, I see you're taking notes. If you're gonna, and maybe I can ask Clerk Chrissy about the policy 3290 and policy 3280, that because these are quoted inside this policy 2050, are there going to be any issues? I mean, are they going to be, is 2050 going to be a precedent over policy 3290 and 3280, or is there any way we can change where it says sex to biological sex in those policies? Because I can see that it can get, I don't know, I'm concerned that it'll be messy.
So Chair Taylor, Trustee Pearson, policy 2050 identifies how the district is going to determine sex. And sex is going to be determined based on the birth certificate. Right. So then what it says in policy 3280 and policy 3295 is that we cannot discriminate based upon sex. But we clearly define in policy 2050 what sex is, how the district's going to determine that, and how the district will address every student will be based on that birth certificate, if that helps.
Yeah, that helps. Can you give me an example? Let's say a boy comes and wants to be a girl, or is telling everybody I'm a girl. And it's not on the birth certificate. And how do you handle that?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Pearson, so if a student were to come and say that I am a girl and they're a biological boy, and they're wanting that and a staff member hears that, what we would ask them to do is refer that to the counselor. The staff members are not to have any conversations with them around those topics. The counselor then, as I mentioned, meet with the student, try to understand the student's concerns, understand the student's well-being. If those are all there, then immediately they would contact the family to notify the family, to bring the family in so that the family and the student can talk through how this is occurring, why this is occurring, and then they can move forward with that process. And it's hard to say because I don't know. I mean, that's just a hypothetical. I don't know all the details behind it and the age of that student and those things.
Okay, thank you.
So Trustee Pearson, we did do some requests regarding the first policy, which had to do with, I believe it was, and I didn't take that note down, it was the request that we had made for Dr. Russell to bring us back the standards, but there was also a request for historical information on that policy, and then there was one more request prior to that.
I thought it was looking into 3280, adding that biological
sex. Yeah.
Okay.
So
With
is
the
that
attorney.
what you were? Yep. Okay, got it.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Appreciate it. I'm asking because I'm going to have to leave. So.
Yep. Okay. And I didn't. I'm glad you did, because I did not have that first note. I had all the rest. Okay.
I do have one more question before, I think, if you don't mind.
Sure. Go ahead,
Chair.
Trustee Valle, and then we'll move on to the next trustee.
Thank you. This policy, if you can remind me again, applies for every class that we offer in Nampa.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Valle, that is correct. Every class that we offer this would fall under.
Whether it's college graded class or whether it's any class.
That would be correct. What we have asked in the procedure is that certain dual credits, if that's the case, then that information needs to be shared with the family prior to enrolling or being able to take the class, if it affects that in any way. And at this point, I don't believe any other classes outside of our CTE certified nursing class does have some information around gender and gender identity and the care of individuals of gender identity. And again, to enroll in that, you would have to have parental permission and parental notification before you could ever enroll into that. And those standards, to my understanding, are set by the state of Idaho. We'd have to get clarity whether we need to teach those or not, but in every other course, this would say we're not teaching gender, we don't teach sexual orientation, we don't teach any of those things. And some of the concerns around the psychology class, those would not be taught in psychology any longer because of this policy.
Thank you.
All done, Trustee Valle? Okay, perfect. Trustee Simpson, Trustee Kirkman?
I did, really quick.
Perfect.
I just had a question on the school athletics about the number of, do we have any extracurriculars or activities that don't fall under IHSAA?
Chess.
I believe he's actually correct. I don't honestly.
And I'm asking because I feel like then is there not clear definition in moving forward in this policy for if it is an activity that isn't regulated by IHSAA, how things will happen? Or is it immediately we're following this policy? You know what I'm saying?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Simpson, good question. Because the policy, if the policy ever gets adopted, it would fall under all aspects of it. I think you bring up a good point around if it's not a sanctioned Idaho High School Athletic Association. Many of the things in this still pertain to it, though. How do we determine biological sex? Trips, accommodation, student records, all of those things kind of fit all under this. I would have to double check again with legal to find out. My understanding would be yes, it would. If we're following Idaho High School Athletic Association things, that we would have similar requirements, but I don't know around non-sanctioned, so that's something I'd have to ask.
So, Trustee Simpson, do we want to add that directive in? What happens to activities outside the scope of IHSA's reach?
Yeah, I think we just need to know, I know the intent, so we want to make, I feel like before anything's voted on this, we want to make sure that it follows the intent of the board's will, right? And so knowing how that would be, how our attorney interprets that, if there is something that isn't, and my guess would probably be exactly what Dr. Russell just stated, but just making sure.
Okay. Trustee Simpson, are you finished with?
That was it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee Kirkman, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I got a ton, but
Okay.
I'll just ask one. Is it appropriate in open meeting at this time to discuss why we put IHSAA rules in there? Because there is a reason why we have it in there. Based on the pending federal case in Idaho and so on, is this?
I trust, or Super Dr. Russell, did you want to
Super
answer that
Dr.
question?
Russell.
Super Dr. Russell.
Wow.
Greg Super.
Chair Taylor, yeah, far from that. Yeah, there was a Idaho law that was passed, I believe, was previous session that clearly banned transgender students from being able to participate in athletics. That passed the Idaho legislature. My understanding was that had to do with a university student, and I believe that was then challenged in the courts or went to the courts, and I believe it was stayed. Again, not being a lawyer, so what I mean, what I
I'm
believe.
sorry, excuse me. It went to federal court here in
Federal,
Idaho,
yes.
not state court. It went to a
Yes.
federal court.
It's put in a stay there, and so until that gets decided in the courts, the state fell back to previous guidance, which the Idaho High School Athletic Association then adjusted to.
So, and I think that's important to understand, especially for those listening or interested in this, why that's in this policy. It's because if we took that out and put in a policy that says, for example, whatever that law says, then we would be in violation because that's been stayed right now in federal court.
That
decision.
statute.
That statute has been stayed. That statute is not in effect because it's been stayed in federal court, if I understand correctly. So if we were to put that language, that absolute language into a policy in this district, we would be in violation of that federal court, stay in federal court, which is why are putting the Idaho High School Association activities, whatever it is. I can't remember now, the IHSAA rules and guidelines, because there are certain criteria, it's not absolute, there's criteria in that association rules that students have to meet in order for a transgender to play on a different team. Okay, that's why we're going to those rules, because they're a little more nebulous than the absolute statute. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear on that, and if there's any questions from the public as why that's in this draft.
Trustee Kirkman, any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, trustees, any other questions or comments regarding this policy?
Yeah, I do want to make a comment really quickly. Before we didn't have anything in place, now we're putting something together that makes sense. And as things change with the law in the state of Idaho, we'll go ahead and make whatever amendments are needed. But this is why it's important to be involved. This is why it's important to care about our kids. And I think I know it may sound, earlier I heard some comments that it was only me and Tracy, the only ones that cared about this, and I would like to say that that's wrong, because I know for a fact that people here care. All of us care. And we may care in little different ways, but overall we're all trying to make a difference for the students. And Superintendent Russell was very proactive in bringing this to the table. So I do want to give him props. Thank you. And I think as we get closer to having a final draft and we get your opinions, you will see that this is going to be something that makes sense and compares to the values of the city. And we truly appreciate you and your comments and your willingness to give us your input on this. And this, as I talked with our superintendent last week or this week, last week. This policy will carry to other policies as well. It's going to create a domino effect. So it really is going to help this district in more ways than what we see just in here. One of those will be the book policy, and things we've talked about before. So I think we're moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Valle. Dr. Russell, any further comment here?
Chair Taylor, no other comments at this time.
Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve policy 2050 for first read.
Second.
We have approved this policy for first read. Clerk Lamont, do we need to have anything in this motion in regards to all of the requests for edits?
No, it's cleaner if you do with edits as discussed, but I think Dr. Russell is going to do those anyway.
Yep.
But it is cleaner if you do it with
Yeah.
for first read with edits as discussed.
I do.
May I amend my motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you. I move that we approve policy 2050 with edits as discussed.
First reading.
Okay.
I'll second that as the first reading, right?
As first reading, yes, sorry.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to approve the first reading of policy 2050 with edits as discussed. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-1. We'll move on now to Otis.
4-1.
Oh, sorry, I meant 4 total. I'm sorry, not 4-1, sorry. 4 total, sorry, we're missing a trustee. That's what I was thinking in my head, is that we didn't have a trustee here, sorry. Motion passes unanimously, all 4 voted yes. Okay, and we will now move on to B, Otis renewal.
Chair Taylor, trustees, I'm going to ask Mr. Knopp to come forward. He's going to share some information around Otis. Otis, to remind you, is the grade book that we use in our elementary school. And we are up for renewal to reuse that. And Mr. Knopp will share some information about that.
Testing, 1, 2,
Now
3,
you're on.
there we go, all right. So in the board packet, you'll see that there's a bid from Otis, the quote that they gave us. If you remember last board meeting, we went through just a few slides and showed you how not only we're using the tool right now, but how we plan to use the tool moving forward across the district. So we're just at a point right now where we need permission to go ahead and renew that licensing agreement for the next 3 years and then continue to move forward with the work we're doing. And I will entertain any questions, clarifications, anything need be. I did not bring the slideshow back that I presented last time.
I was looking forward to it.
Oh,
The
We were
feedback
looking
I
forward
was
to seeing your
receiving from the
slideshow
verbal
all over
cues,
again,
now it was
yes.
11 o'clock at night, and yeah.
Okay, trustees, do we have any questions for Mr. Knopp?
I have a question. I don't know who it goes to, but, you know, knowing that we're going to be tight on money, possibly, it looks like it, that things are going to be a little tighter in the future, maybe more tighter than what we anticipate. Are these some things that we need to kind of look at and say, let's hold off on that to see where we're, you know, so we can use this money for other things? Or is this money that can only be used for this? I'm just wondering if we're looking at the whole picture. I mean, I love this. I'm not opposed to this. I just want to start thinking about, okay, if we can get some money to pay teachers, you know, just thoughts.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Valle, first of all, thank you. We are entering, and I think we talked about that in our last finance budget meeting we had, a very difficult year, I think, coming forward. There's many things that are going to provide some interesting challenges as it comes to finances. I'm going to ask Mr. Knopp if you would just kind of share those finances, a little bit of where this money is coming from. What I would share with you, though, is the importance of having a grade book in the elementaries. That is a necessity we have to have. We have to report grades. Our teachers have now used this for 6 years, maybe 7. And so pulling that out and going to a completely different grade book, we would have to still have some expenses for a grade book. We cannot pay a grade book. And I also would just add, Otis has been a very good partner in this fact that they will negotiate with us on prices, and we have worked with them on prices before. There are other companies that you work with that, because of our size, and we are a large size district in Idaho, but nationwide, we're not large. And I've worked with some other vendors that basically tell you, no, we're not doing anything for you. Here's the price, here's what you get, take it or leave it. And so it's been nice to work with an entity that it will willing to listen to us and work with our teachers, work with our needs, and we're making it a better product with that. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Knopp, and he can share some information.
Right, and answer that question a little bit. We know there's some costs that go along with tools. I will throw out, like, for example, we've been kind of trying to find a way to kind of, I won't say squirrel, but compartmentalize some money into a bit of a savings account that kind of lets us address some of these costs. This would be similar to, say, paying for Gaggle, which is a safety and security tool we use at the secondary level on our devices that helps with our students. So there's different tools that are just going to cost us money, and we knew 3 years ago that this was coming due, right? And whether we went with continuing our contract with Otis or went a different route, this is a tool we have to provide. But certainly we also look at those things, knowing that our financial situation is always changing. It ebbs and flows, there's no doubt about it. And I would say from a value standpoint and an impact on overall student learning from a 612, we feel like this is a really good investment. And yes, we're trying really hard to make data-driven decisions on every dollar we spend and what impact on the overall student learning that's going to have. So
Thank you.
So I have a similar question. The first time I saw Otis, it's the sticker shock of the software. It really is. I understood the last meeting as well that this was a tool that's working, especially in our elementary. So my question is, what do we get for $100,000 a year? Is it support? When you say that they're working with us, does that mean that they're making changes based on our need within the software? Like, can you expand on the understanding of like,
So they're-
how does this relationship work?
I think first, a great way to look at it is it is a license that's per student.
Yep.
And so they're, on the back end, they're supporting an active and reactive grade book that we're constantly inputting data in. That's a big part of the service we're getting. So this is not a, you buy Otis, download it into your system, and then we're just in charge of making it work. So a lot of the data support and how Otis works as a grade book, so to speak, is still being run by Otis. Does that kind of make sense? You're paying for that.
Yeah, it does make
You're
sense.
paying for that service. And then the other pieces that come with it, the analytical piece, which we punch in data, it spits out graphs and all that. Once again, Otis banks and takes care of that. They have assessment banks for questions, so we have the ability to create assessments. They've already got particular question types and questions that are already aligned to standards. So it's fairly easy to drag and drop, so to speak. And then just that other interactive support that is interfaced every day in the classroom if you use it as a learning management system. And part of that, like if you, for especially elementary, but even in some of our secondary schools, you'll see what is called, typically called a page, like a weekly page, and they'll list that out. And that's where the interaction between the teachers and the students are in regards to readings for the week, videos for the week, quizzes for the week, whatever, how they're communicating. This is the path we're going to take this week for their learning. All that's also supported behind the scenes by Otis, so to speak, to keep that all active and live and interactive and reactive. So you're paying for a per student license fee for all of that to be available. And then we also are paying for some professional development as part of that package, as well as Dr. Russell was saying, just a great partnership.
And we do not have to pay for the students not in elementary. So any student paying Power School, we're not still paying an Otis fee. Is that correct or incorrect?
This particular package is for the whole district, so this is student-wide. We do not.
So it is district-wide?
It's K-12.
Yeah.
We do not use the Otis gradebook functioning for secondary, 6-12. Their gradebook is housed
Power School.
in Power School. Elementary gradebook is
It's
housed.
still Otis.
K-5 and Otis.
Do we
Yes.
ever see so what I've heard in inquiring with a lot of teachers recently, because there were so many issues with Otis in the beginning, and what I've heard now is that teachers not necessarily that there were per se issues as much as like it was how we had to pilot and making the change when we did, and all of that having to do with 2020. And now as they're getting to the other side of it, Otis is much more robust. Is there, because we pay for Power School as well, correct?
That is correct.
So is there a hope in the future for us to go to one grade book, or are we finding that we really truly have the need to keep two?
Our challenge, lest things change, our challenge is Power School has not provided a standards-based gradebook that has really supported the learning at the elementary level.
Wait a second, I'm so sorry, Mr. Knopf. It's hearing in
You're
here.
okay.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to make you repeat it again.
Up to
This
this
is like my least favorite place to meet.
Up to this point, the challenge has been that the Power School gradebook has not been able to support learning through a standards-based grading system.
But Otis supports a calculated letter grade.
Otis has a much stronger standards-based grading component to it.
It has a stronger standards-based grading, I get, but does it have, so are we saying that the conversion to letter grade in secondary is weak?
No, I think the traditional tool as a grade book is fine. It's not easy for parents to access necessarily. So it's still, one-stop shop is still in Power School. And
Got
see,
it.
here's part of the challenge. In a utopian world, we all want one tool. And we all want to be able to land in one tool.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, because I got that impression that we all want
Power
one tool,
School
but we're
is
in the-
so much more than just a grade book. It does all that rostering, it does records keeping, it does transcript keeping, also, grade book, storage, it does all these other things. Otis will never do. That's not Otis's ballgame. Otis is meant to be used in the classroom. It's really a learning support tool. And so we're a long ways from being able to say either or. Right now, we believe that the marriage of those two tools presents us with the best opportunity to be successful.
And do we have a relation?
Sorry, Chair Taylor, I just wanted to answer just one other thing real quick. No, that's okay. They're great questions, and it's a really good question. Ideally, as Mr. Knopp said, we'd like to get to one. What we're seeing is we really need two. PowerSchool primarily is a student information system that has all the data that we collect around enrollment that allows us to report to the state of Idaho so we can get funding from the state. It also has a gradebook component to it that we use with our traditional grades in 612, and that's what we use with it. So it's really hard for us to move away from PowerSchool. In the elementary schools, after 6 or 7 years, what we're seeing is our teachers have become very familiar with it, and we've also been able to ask them to adjust certain things that our elementary teachers have asked, particularly around some of the assessments and some of the report outs and how that looks in the screens and how they're able to give that information out to parents, that we felt like it's been a good partner. And we see it's an advantage at this point to just continue moving forward with that. Someday there may be this amazing tool that has grade books and student information that allows us to upload it to the state. And if we ever can find that, then we would go possibly look at something like that.
Well, and I guess my question would be is if that's the type of relationship that you're explaining that we have with Otis, could that be our 3-year plan? Please don't misunderstand that my suggestion is consolidation now. I think it would be too detrimental throughout the district because it seems to me like both tools are truly utilized. And it makes perfect sense as to why. I actually think sticking with standards in the elementary and going back to those letter grades in secondary really solved, like, I think that the community was heard with that one. I really feel like everybody I talked to is like, oh, I love it now, or I love it now. But I believe that personally, I'm hoping that someday we can find that single solution.
Sure.
Because I do think it's a way for us to mitigate cost.
No, and I think that would be our.
And I think that that's all on our minds because of where we are at with the budget.
I would have
the
to.
money conversations we're going to have. That's a great point.
And I would have to go back and check with Cody Krebs. I believe in the past, like our annual cost with PowerSchool in regards to what the grade book that we're currently purchasing is very minute. So in other words, we would have all the things we talked about, information storing system, scheduling system, attendance system, all of those things really are the bulk of our PowerSchool cost. So until we find I don't see Otis go in that direction. So it'd be a pretty big challenge, at least right now, unless another tool represents itself out in the landscape that we can afford. You know, sometimes
it's not more expensive.
Similar to what Trustee Valley was just talking about. You know, sometimes there are tools that maybe can do a better job than we have. They're just not in our market. Yeah. They market different parts of the country that just have a bigger budget in this area than we do.
And I really appreciate you appeasing all the questions. And please
you're good.
don't misconstrue. I grasp the importance of what you're bringing today. I just really had very similar thoughts and had a lot of questions regarding this because my hope would be that moving on down the road, like that something does present itself as an opportunity.
And that's one of the reasons we're only asking for a 3-year agreement.
Yep.
We don't want to lock in any longer than that.
I loved it.
Certainly we can go out as far as, 5, 7. Otis would sign us up for 10 if we asked for 10 probably.
I greatly appreciate you didn't ask me for a 10-year commitment
3,
up here. Yeah.
3. We feel like 3 is a
Thank you.
good window. It gives us a chance 3 years down the road to have a much better evaluation. Assuming there's not another pandemic on the horizon, we're going to go ahead and move forward, assuming that's not the case.
Chair Taylor, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
One, the threshold of users for this contract. So 3-year contract, 318,000. You said it's based on student. What was the term you used?
That's based on 13,500 student enrollment.
Okay. So what's the threshold for the next? If we were to hit 14,000, would there be an increase, or do you know that?
If we got cleared at 14,000, there may be a small increase. Normally,
Okay,
there's
so
a buffer.
It's negligible.
Right.
If anything.
There's almost always a buffer
Okay.
in here. Right.
And did the, why did I write this down? Did that change the price structure? Oh, the 3 years. Did the 3-year contract, as opposed to a 6-year, did that change the price structure at all?
A little bit, yeah. It's always a
bit
little
more
cheap.
expensive?
It's always a little cheaper as you go farther out. Now, I will say this, through our negotiations, just as a K-5 tool, we were landing in the 250, 260 range.
That's why.
They really want us to be a K-12 partner because they got a lot of things they want to continue to support us on and learn from us, so to speak, in that partnership. So really adding 6-12 is, we're getting an excellent deal out in the market.
Okay, that's why I wrote that down.
Yes,
So we have it
yes.
just for elementary
We're-
and not secondary. Did that change the price structure?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so We're down to a little over $8 per student license now, I think, on there, and it's their typical rate is in the 11 range.
Okay, good.
11 to 11.50 range, and without the secondary joining us, we're probably going to land in the $11 range per student at the K-5 level.
And do you know when the current Power School contract ends? Okay,
I
no
do
big
not.
deal. I was just wondering if
That's-
we were
yep.
looking down the road and
That's
if
Cody
these two
Krepp's
might meet
land,
somewhere
Courtney
down the end of
Stauffer.
the
Yeah, Mr.
road.
Stauffer might be able to help us there.
And
Year to
why?
year.
Oh, is it
Okay.
year to year?
Year to year.
Okay. Okay, good. And then my other one was like, I'm surprised Tyler hasn't developed some type of all-in-one
Tyler.
type.
Well, it's
system for the
it is
department.
interesting. So Tyler's one of our classroom Microsoft gurus, so to speak. And one of Otis's goals, as well as our goal, is to get a better or a stronger partnership between the Otis tool and Microsoft, so to
great.
speak. So we do have visions for Tyler.
Oh, good.
During the day, I see that he has some free time to kill. So
well-
I was going to fill.
might as well use him
I'm
more.
looking for more tasks for Tyler. Yeah.
All right. Well, I thank you. I appreciate the response to the questions. So.
Trustee Simpson, any questions?
No.
Okay. All right, trustees, if we've asked all our questions and we've said all of our comments, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the 3-year Otis contract as posted.
I second. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I almost said 4-1 again. I just am trying to, okay? And then I have to take a health break.
Thank you, trustees.
There's still 3 of us here. There's still a majority, and the vice chair can take over. So.
That's right.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. Well, now Marco just.
We're moving now to information items and reports.
So Chair Taylor, trustees, just wanted to share with you the opt-in process. I'm going to ask Mr. Stoffer if he'd come up and share this. Again, this came out from discussions in our last couple of meetings around notification for parents when classes are registered for. We have a workaround, we believe, this year that we can send as quickly as this week, I believe, or next week. And to at least give it a shot and try. Because this is new, there may be some kinks with it we'll have to work out, and we're also really curious what kind of response we'll get, because one of the concerns we mentioned is what do we do for students that don't have an approved schedule. So Mr. Stoffer will walk us through this today and just kind of share where we are putting this together using the tools that we have, and we hope in the future that we'll have a more streamlined process.
Chair Taylor, Board of Trustees. All right, so we do have a PowerPoint that I included in your packet that I can review with you. Inside of it, we have a timeline that we feel that we could meet. There are some pros and there's some cons with any timeline that we put out, but first, we need to inform parents and give them some information on what it is that we expect of them with this opt-in. So our target date for May 22nd is to have that information out. We'll do that through a very varied ways. We'll probably put together a little video. We'll do a PowerPoint of how to access and what's going to be coming to parents and what the expectation is for that. The 24th will be really the kickoff. With we don't necessarily have a system currently in place, and so we're using Parent Square as our tool. That it wasn't necessarily meant to do an opt-in type of process, but it does. That allows us to accomplish the task, but it's a two-step process. Process. Again, going back, trying to find a system that could do it all. Time and money were not at our disposal, so we used what we had tried to smash those together. So Parent Square is the best option that we have available to us now. So the first section is on the 24th, there'll be two types of notifications that will go out to parents through Parent Square. The first one will be a PDF of the course selections that the students have done. That happened at the earlier part of this year. Students went through the course catalog, chose classes that they want. They have their core classes that are required. They have options for their electives, and then they have alternates that they selected in that process. So we will make sure that parents get a copy of everything that they've done through a PDF, and that will be through a secure document link that comes through PowerSchool. So they'll be able to see it. That would be the first email. The second one is the opt-in process. And the opt-in process is where the parent has to identify whether they approve of all of those courses, both the required courses with their titles, the electives with their titles, and the alternates. And those alternates are important to allow us flexibility in scheduling. So there's not a way that we can get away with not having parents approve those alternate schedules as well. That will be the second one, and that also comes through a secure document in which the parents will need to sign electronically, and we can see the report from that when they have signed and what they have signed. And so I have some examples of what each one of these look like that I'll show you in the next phase. Our goal, and this is where Dr. Russell mentioned a little bit about the tricky component of this. One is a time frame that allows our counselors to be able to get in and solidify schedules so that we can open up school as seamless as possible. There's always a few things that we have to do for some kids, but by far and large, we need all of our kids in classes on day one for various reasons. The most important one right now we've mentioned is a little bit about our funding structure. We need to have kids in classes and classes approved so that we can register them. So what we will do after we send out the two notifications is we can tell which parents have looked at them and which ones they've signed because they'll be sending us information back. We can then send reminders to parents, hey, we haven't got it yet, please take a look at these links, and so we can send out reminders to just those parents who haven't finalized their students' opt-in. We would propose we'd like to do this for 30 days, and then after the 30 days, if we haven't received any information, to be able to move forward with the registration process. It is critical at that point in time. We're kind of at that mass state of where we have to start getting kids put into schedules, balancing schedules, and that takes about 3 to 4 weeks of prep time before the counselors. And then the counselors will work with individual students. So that's the part that I don't have in here that I need some feedback from the board on if they're willing to have that 30-day period if we have no information that has come back from parents after multiple attempts, that we can go ahead and move forward with it. Now, with that being said, I'll let you think about that as I show you what the actual presentation or the actual notifications look like, if that works. Because maybe that will help clarify what it is that we're showing parents. So the next slide is the parent communication. The first one in the top left of your corner is what it will look like on the device. If people are looking at a phone, that's the notification. The reason why we put that on there is that it's really important for our parents to access this information through their email. And so in the title, we'll make sure that we've put in there, please access this information through your email. The instructions will be given, and you'll see the second slide is a copy of that. It just so happens I did a lot of pilot. My son is at Nampa High School, so I was able to use him. My wife wanted to know why she was getting 500 test emails. It works, but we made sure that we kind of ran it through the gambit of tests to make sure that the process would work. So an email would go out explaining it. It has the link to the PDF. The third screen is what a PDF looks like with all the course selections, so parents would get that first. They can print that out. They can do whatever they want with it, but they will have a record of that from this point forward. So that's the first phase. Second phase, or the second notification, which will come shortly after, is the opt-in component. In reference to, before we jump, right here, as Tyler's bringing up, is the data that we can collect from Parent Square. It allows us to see that the parents received it. And I think that's really important. We want to make sure that our parents are getting this information so we can see right off the bat if a parent has received it. And this is the type of information you see on the screen that we can see. So good data for us, and I can share that with you as far as how many parents are accessing it. We could come back and share that data at any given time.
So I'm sorry, real quick on that. The parents who don't respond, obviously you catch it in this analytics, but that's just generally, we have this many parents and not this many parents.
Correct.
Can you respond back to automatically, because I do understand that staff, this seems like it could be pretty staff intensive. Could there be an automatic message that goes back to those, is it automatic message goes back to the parents who haven't responded yet?
I would have to pre-program and send it out, but I could extract that information from this data collection right here.
Okay.
I would extract those parents, and then I could send it directly to those parents.
Okay.
So it won't be automatic, but it is much easier in the sense that we can identify who has and who hasn't, and I can filter it and send it to just those parents who have not received or opened it.
So is this something that you can also send a text message to open your email? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the part about Parent Square is that parents have chosen their preferred method of receiving information. So we'll prep a message for the app, which is only about 25% of our parents use the app. The majority of our parents use the email feature. The texting feature is also pretty minimal, but we'll prepare messages for each one of those formats. And that's why I showed that one in the previous screen of what an email would look like if it went on the app, because it does have a different appearance. We do want to push parents to their email. We're over 80% of our parents already use emails as their main form of communication on Parent Square as well. So that's good news for us.
How does this work with people that can't speak the language?
It automatically translates to their native language. That's one of the other neat features about the Parent Square, is that parents in the tools identify their native language, and it translates for them. So this is one of the powerful features of Parent Square.
So when somebody registers in school, they're given some type of paper that said, hey, this is Parent Square. Okay.
Yes.
Do you know how many parents actually sign up?
We do. We have 98% of our parents who have signed up.
Oh, really?
I
Yeah.
actually really like Parent Square.
Yep. Parent Square is a great tool.
I like it better than Remind.
It's a ton.
Hello.
It's Remind on steroids.
Thank you.
One of the things on the potential negative side is parents say we get a lot of information. And so that can be one of those things that we're working on as well. And they get to decide when they receive the information and how they receive the information.
And for what class?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I'd rather over-communicate than under-communicate.
And I love it when parents say that we send out too much stuff. That means we're doing our job getting them information. So it's actually, right now, I think it's the best tool that we have. There's other tools that might be out there that we're going to spend this year exploring to make this more seamless. But it is, because of the 2 steps, that's the one part that I'm more nervous about, because there are 2 steps versus being an all-in-one where they could look at the class, click on the link, give them the information as far as where the transparency document is, and they could say yes or no per class. That's what I envision and dream for. But right now, with the time frame that we have in where we are at in the registration process, that's impossible for us to get right now. But maybe a year from now, we'll have something that looks more like what we're dreaming of.
Would it be possible to just throw those links to all of, I mean, because we have them somewhere. We have the curriculum somewhere.
It's in the email.
Yeah.
Yep, we have it there.
You can
It's
click
linked.
there and go look
Yep.
for it for yourself.
We
We're
have
not going
done
to make
that.
it that easy right now.
Yes, we have done that,
Okay, very
included
good.
in this messaging. The link is
Very
there
good.
for the transparency documents. We are currently, we've remodeled the page so that you could look at it a little bit easier as far as it's by school. So you click on the school, and then you can dive into the subfolders that have the information that we're putting into it. So we're rebuilding one of our websites to make it a little bit easier for parents to navigate.
First of all, so impressive, just because I have to pay to have this stuff done, so it's like water to wine right now. So I love it.
Thank you.
I appreciate that we're already here. As far as feedback, I believe that 30 days, we have to have, I would have been one of those kids whose parents maybe hadn't opted in. So I would agree that we have to have, and not because I had bad parents, but just because. And so I think that 30 days is a good timeline. I like that you're walking us through the process in its infancy and that we'll get to walk through it with you. I'm really impressed that you have something out so quickly. And I also like Parent Square. So I'll be excited to see. And I also love that you can offer us such precise analytics.
It is really good program for that. And even on the second phase, when we look at the opt-in, it will also provide us the information that the parents input. So we'll have a spreadsheet built for our counselors to be able to also make phone calls before the end of the year and try to resolve some of the concerns quickly. So that's our goal, is to really make this a tool. And our hope is that it isn't too cumbersome. We understand that this first year will be a little bit of a testing water, but the second page, if we want to jump to that for the second communication, I just want to share with you what that looks like real quick, because that's truly the opt-in. The first one was just the schedule. The second one is where the power is in the opt-in. Parents will be able to, part of this form will pre-populate for your student's information. It will automatically put it in. So that top part where it says student's name, student ID, that's pre-populated. That's to make sure that we're not mixing kids up, that their student ID and their name are unique, and it's unique for that parent, and it's only that parent that can do that. Now, if we have 2 kids in the same high school, it'll be a drop-down box. Well, they'll have to do this process for both of their children, so it's not a one and all. They have to do it per child.
Very similar to Power School.
Very similar. So you have to select, and it will have both the students, or 3 of the students, or 4, or how many students you have at the high school
So
level.
nothing that we haven't seen or
It's
used
nothing you
before
haven't
as a
seen.
parent, especially in these last few years.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Then it will pre-populate the information. Then there are 2 boxes that require the parents to input information. The first one is if they are in agreement with the student's course selection. They can put yes, which means they're good, they can move forward. They put no, then the second box, and actually, even if you put yes or no, we were redundant here on purpose. So if I put, am I in agreement with the student, the courses my students select, if I press yes, it still forces me to ask question number 2. And question number 2 is, if you said yes above, please type approve. So we have a second reading of a parent approving that schedule. So we will make sure that it goes through twice, that they have approved. If they haven't, then we've asked them to type the name of the course that they are concerned about. And so that we have that in there as well, that we can go back and contact that parent. Now, the final part is the signature. This is a document that is formal and it is official, and it will cut the mustard for legal as well. It's meant to be that way. And so when the parent signs, it timestamps when they sign it and who signed it. And we get a digital copy, which is the second form right there that Tyler's now showing you on the screen. It will, and there's mine that I was testing. You can see how it put my name in, it put the time in, and it put all my answers in it. I can also extract this again, like I mentioned, for counselors and for our registering folks that are involved in that will have by name the parent who approved or did not approve, the student's name, the courses, and so we can make those adjustments on the back end.
Okay.
This is basically the spreadsheet that you're seeing in front of you, the data that we will extract from that as well. So if a parent says, hey, I didn't do that, we can automatically pull it up and say, here's what the information that we received, here's the signature, here's where it was done, here's the time. So it helps the district in that form that we do have that confirmation.
So there is that possibility, because, well, I'm not going to out myself here, but there is that possibility that a student could go into a parent's email address.
They would have to have their password.
And approve it.
If they had your password.
But that's not our
problem. There is
problem.
a hypothetical issue that could happen. However, we have made sure that we have sent it to the proper channels.
And that's all we can do.
It's all we can do.
All right.
Gage had my email once.
And if the parent complains, he says, I never approved it.
We have the proof.
Your son did it.
Yeah. So what about, I apologize. Go ahead. You're probably going to answer my question.
Now I'm just ready to answer your question. I wanted to walk you through the process that we put together, make sure that we had captured all of the board's vision and what that looked like, and then really just ask that last request. But in between, I'm ready to answer any questions.
So the 30 days would be from May 24th?
Correct.
Then the time would start running? And, okay.
And we'd start on June 6th, sending reminders. So that gives them a 2-week window to fill it out.
You got 30, you got a month and a half.
You do.
Really, you got a month and a parent has a month and a half to go in and approve those courses.
Correct. And with reminders.
And I would assume too that maybe we'll post that there's a new process on Facebook and use all of
That's
our
the
appropriate
22nd messaging. We'll make sure that gets out in multiple venues. We'll do it in different formats. We'll do our best to make sure that that's out there. And if they have any questions, up until, if we have staff in our school buildings, they can come in and we can help them there as well.
I appreciate at this point now that those questions, not that it was yours, but those questions that you just asked are kind of superfluous now. That you are doing a good job of communicating changes that are going on in the district to our parents, and I appreciate that. What about changes in the schedule that have to happen? Is there going to be another opt-in? So, hey, we had to make this change. Here's the outside of the alternates.
Yeah, outside the alternate, that's going to have to be a conversation when the counselor's in there picking up and making that call to the parent.
Okay, so it's not going to go back through this process again.
I would
and
not
that's something
recommend
that
it.
can maybe work back later on down the road.
I think the challenge with doing that is you can tell this process is intensive and it is a little bit time consuming as far as making sure parents have time to respond to it.
Sure.
And the moments you're talking about, that's when the student is typically sitting with me. I'm making some schedule adjustments and I just can't make all those classes fit. And here are the options. And they may not be in their alternate, but we always go to the alternate first.
Sure.
But again, I was a scheduler at the high school as well, so I understand that process. That I've sat in front of kids and parents and I've gone, I have these two options, which is the one that you want. And in that point in time, it would be, we need to make sure that a parent is involved in that process. And that would be more towards that August timeframe.
Have you had a chance to discuss this with the counselors, especially in the high schools right now?
We have, actually. Dr. Russell has already started that conversation. I have a meeting based on what we get from here with the schedulers tomorrow.
So the question is a little premature then. And what kind of feedback are you getting from the counselors?
So, Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, at first it was kind of a, oh, wow, this is a lot. But then after they kind of, it sunk in a little bit, they were actually really happy about this because they thought maybe we can continue to move to where this is more automated, where it really is parents, students making those choices, and it's less counselor dependent because
That's
it is
what I
so intense on counselors to do the scheduling. And so I think they were seeing kind of little both sides. It'll tell us a lot this first go around on the feedback we get back, and then we can start making some adjustments. But I think this process could be really beneficial for us in the next year, 2, 3 years from now.
In a number of ways. I appreciate it.
I do too. I appreciate it too. But I do want to say, in my experience, our counselors are phenomenal. Like, if I didn't know that I was not the only person in the school, I would feel like my child and I were the only person in the school, because they are so hands-on with scheduling. They are so hands-on with answering questions. So I love that this adds to that extension into parents and that communication. I also think that there'll be other things such as more understanding and knowledge about our CTE program. Like, I just think that there's a vast majority of things that may be actualized through this process that are far beyond why we even started. So I'm very excited for this. Very excited. I'm always overly, like, you over deliver. I love it. I just love it.
Thank you.
I do. He gets up and I'm like, yes.
And Chair, if I can say, I'm all for what you're doing right now. The
Same.
30-day,
I love it.
more than gracious.
Ditto. All right, trustees, do we have any other questions or comments for Mr. Stoffer? Trustee
Thank
Simpson?
you, Board Chair. You know me, I'm going to ask.
Please do.
I see, I know what the line at the counseling office sometimes looks at the beginning of the year at the high school. But I kind of want to know, just so if we talk to people, someone moves in July, they haven't been a part of this, will they see similar things, but maybe in building? I've never been a parent who's enrolled kids, so I don't even know what it looks like on that end. I'm just going to be honest. I really don't. But I know there's steps beforehand to get kids enrolled. And would that be more at a building level, actually maybe signing, or still even electronically signing so that it's updated to the spreadsheet?
That's a great question, Trustee Taylor and Board of Trustees and Trustee Simpson. I'm still creating what that one looks like. My first goal was to get this first movement through, but it would be something more localized at the building level. There are some tools that, in the way we implement this, that it could help some parents. When we were talking a little bit earlier about school information systems and Power School, there's lots of Power School, and so I'm going to regress a little bit to try to answer your question, if I may. That system is built to maintain and house student records, and that's what it was built for. It has a lot of other components that it's added over years, in particular as that company has been bought out by other companies. And Power School was bought out by Pearson, which added the grade book, and that's just the world of technology. Bigger companies cannibalize other good technology, and they bring it into their warehouse. And that's really what happens with any system that you engage in, is that there is this potential merger, this changing of the guard. We've had to change out a few things even in our own infrastructure because they've been bought out and no longer exist. They want the database of the records to move to their software. So the reason why I bring that up is that Power School and other entities, we have to look at different resources to meet the needs the best that we can that work with each other as well. And that's that question that Mr. Knopp was trying to answer about Otis, is Otis does a really good job in its lane. That's what it's really good at. Power School and most student system information systems are really good at that, but they have other pieces to it that aren't as good. So we have incorporated a software that helps us register students that is not Power School. And so that's where their PDF comes from that I just shared with you. That piece in July and August isn't on anymore. It comes from a different format, so it's going to have to look a little bit different than the current function that we're doing right now. So that's why we're still going to have to build what does it look like when we have a new student that enrolls. And most of that's going to have to be done at the school level, but we'll help support that. And I have a little bit of time to try to figure that one out. So that's why it's a more complex issue when you have new kids enrolling in August. But we'll work on finding a solution that's reasonable and hopefully automated that helps both the registrar and the counselors and the parents have that as well. Parent Square will work, but we have to get them enrolled in it first. And so we have to get them into school, we have to get them into Power School, and then we have to get the Power School information pushed to Parent Square. So that takes a little bit of time. And depending on when they enroll, that's where it becomes tough. Now, that being said, most of the time when parents are enrolling in July, end of July and August, they're actually in the building with the kids selecting the courses. And so we do have that advantage for most situations. They're not doing it completely online. They do typically have to come in and produce the documents to the registrar, and most of the course selections are happening there. So I think there will be a merger of some of the options we're talking about there right now in the fall when they're registering for the first time.
And just to be clear, I'm sorry.
Nope, thank you. Yep.
Did I answer your question? I know it was a long roundabout
you
way,
did.
but I needed to
Totally.
explain there's
Yep.
parts.
Thank you.
And that brought up another thing I was going to ask is the default after 30 days plus 2 weeks, it's just going to default to what the kid has on the schedule, whether the parent approves or not approves. We can assume that if the parent doesn't respond, they're approving.
They're
it.
approving.
All right.
Yep.
I think that's a very important piece.
Yep. Correct.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you, Mr. Stoffer.
Thank you very much.
All right, we are going to move now to enrollment report.
Chair Taylor, trustees, the typical enrollment report that you see every month. If you have questions.
One just popped into my head.
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman?
And only because my daughter keeps reminding me that her last day of school is Wednesday as a senior. So how does that affect the enrollment report, ADA, if you will, from May 17th to the end of the year for seniors?
Yeah.
Or does it?
Chair Taylor,
For
Trustee
funding.
Kirkman, great question. And so, again, the first 10 weeks of school is the really critical component. That's the one that determines 85% of our budget to pay salaries. So it doesn't affect that one at all. Then you move into the best 28 weeks of school. And so, again, you're taking the best 20 weeks of all the weeks of
So it
school.
still doesn't affect
So it doesn't really affect it then as well, and which is why so many school districts do it.
Because I just kept telling her she's going to have to go to school till the very end of the day just so we can get the end of the year. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and I do want to say, because I also have a senior that he finished a class and he thought he could just stop going yesterday. And I was like, no, that's not a thing. So I definitely feel like that cascading message is getting out to our teachers, because I got a call and it had to do with all of the calculations of cost having to have him be there. And I said, no, I get it. He'll be there. That's what I said. I said, oh, no, I get it. He'll be there. You didn't have to call.
He's just
That was
going
his
for,
own idea.
They're
Yeah.
just going for a different reason
Yeah,
now.
totally different reason. But it was his own. I mean, he had a whole plan.
That's funny.
So yeah, but I think that that's getting down to our teachers as well. So what I appreciate is that understanding as far as enrollment and funding is being understood throughout the district. That was just a comment. Any other questions on enrollment? Okay, Mr. Dewey, you can do a dance, a jig, or you can give us the finance treasurer report.
I will add one more thing to that. This year, because we're enrollment based, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
who's
matter,
in the
right.
classroom. Next year, it will matter at the end. And typically, our last 3 weeks are our worst anyway, so those don't count in anything we do.
We know why.
So there's some
Imagine that.
Our
safeguards in
children.
there.
Yes, imagine that.
Yes.
So, and last year was the first year where our best 28 weeks actually increased versus everything else is usually about 99%. So as far as financials, everything's according to plan. We have a little bit of overages in certain areas, and we have a little underages in other areas. Revenue looks to be about right. Won't be able to tell you what our best 28 weeks are for a couple weeks. We don't actually officially know that until the fiscal year's done, so that's fantastic. But other than that, we're on track to there, and then we're on track with our budget going forward as well. We keep finding new creative ways to spend ESSER money and continue to be on that ESSER bubble, unfortunately. But that will be done next year, and we'll go back to normal here soon and start living, in the post-pandemic era, and see how that works out for us.
Thank you, Mr. Dewey. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Dewey?
No, my comment is just thank you for the work session that we had. Very,
Absolutely.
very informative.
Great.
So I appreciate that.
That was the only comment that I had in my head as well. And I just want to bring that up in open session in our regular meetings, because very informative, very, very concise to the point workshop that you gave. I also appreciate it. I don't know that we get a ton of, views on that, but I appreciated you bringing it, and So I have no questions because I feel like you've given us a really good
It was
depiction
all
of
Greg.
exactly
Greg
where
told me
we're
to do
at.
it. Greg told me to do it. I just do what he says.
That's how it works sometimes.
Thank you, Mr. Dewey.
Thanks.
All right, guys, we are going to move straight on to our superintendent report.
Chair Taylor, trustees, just a few quick updates tonight. Just a reminder, high school graduations are going to start this week and roll into next week. And I just wanted to share with the board, there are often many things that we deal with sometimes that are difficult and hard, but graduation is one of those great celebrations where we get to see how our system has really impacted a student and impacted their life. Every student that walks across that stage is a success. And when you hear the cheers from the families, they're a success. And I just want that to be stated because we sometimes take that for granted, thinking, oh, the student graduate, yay, we clap. But that's a chance at life for that student, and it's a great deal to the families as well, and something that our system has helped create it. So it's an exciting time, and it's a great time for those families. Summer school schedules, we're starting June 6th. We'll have our summer schools running at all of our secondary schools. Those will be for credit recovery in the high schools. We'll also do some advanced opportunities for some students that want to take some advanced courses and moving forward or do some college credit as well. We'll have some of our middle schools. We'll be doing summer school, and I believe we have 4 elementaries that are going to start some summer schools as well. Because ESSER Fund might be our last summer of summer school in the elementary, but we'll have to update you as we go on with that. And then just wanted to update you where we are with our hiring and resignations, because it's that kind of year. To date, we've had 69 employees resign or retire. And last year, throughout the whole year, we had 148. So we're a little less than last year, which is positive. We're not seeing anything that's ringing any alarms or anything like that. Very normal that we're seeing through that. And we'll probably see a few more matriculate as we get through school. And that usually goes into June. But then it kind of slows down around July. So about another 6 weeks or so. And don't expect to surpass last year.
Trustees, any questions for Dr. Russell?
I have a comment real quickly, Chair. I have family graduating from Nampa High School, so I have to be there, but I know there's another graduation going on during the same time. And I'm wondering if there's any people that are going to be able to make it, trustees, anybody that can represent us, that would be very welcome.
My son graduates from Nampa High that evening, so I'll be at Nampa High.
Yeah, Trustee Taylor and Chair Taylor, Trustee Vice, sorry. Mr. LeBou is going to represent the district at that graduation. That is a union's graduation, and unfortunately, because of the Brandt Center, there was a schedule conflict that they had to schedule it on both nights at the same time. It's Monday night. So Mr. LeBou would be there. I'm not sure if another trustee is going to make it or not.
No, I'll be at Nampa High School graduation.
Yeah, he's got your daughters too.
I actually think I'll be there,
Oh.
but I don't have it at the other one, but I don't have it on my calendar, and I'm not sure if I accidentally deleted it or what happened.
He'll text you the schedule.
But yeah, just let me know, because I was planning on that,
That'd be
because I
awesome.
figured,
'Cause it
that-
did
yes,
change,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Mandy.
No problem.
Thank you,
wish,
Trustee Simpson.
Dr. Russell, I appreciate your comments about the graduation because that is what it's all about
Yep.
at the end of the day. But I was just thinking here, man, I wish there was a way, because it is about the students, but I wish there was a way we kind of have a graduation for all the teachers too at the end of the year and kind of recognize them, like you made it another year, congratulations, that kind of a thing. Because they really are, you guys really are heroes when it comes to sticking it out for the whole year. But no, I agree with you. This is what it's all about, getting them to this point.
My son wouldn't have made it to this point without the teachers at Nampa High.
Absolutely not.
All right, we have that information update, or sorry, do we have, now we're on to 9, any possible agenda items for future boards meetings, trustees?
I think, Chair, if I may.
Absolutely.
I think I already talked with the superintendent about bringing up the book policy,
And
or the library policy.
And as a reminder, just so you guys know, it is on our list. If you look in the April packet, it was on our priorities list, so that is there.
Yeah, I was going to reach out. In fact, I did reach out to Mr. Knopp about that but now that you're moving, is there another individual that we can talk
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, there's not another individual at this point, and there will be in that kind of transition with that. Trustee Valle and I did discuss maybe drafting some procedures around library books that might provide some more clarity, because I think some of the library book concerns will fall under Policy 2050 in a lot of ways around educating, discussing, talking about those topics. We wouldn't do that whether that's a library book or a classroom. But it might be helpful for the board to see some procedures. And so that's what we talked about and can be happy to bring forth and share those with the board.
Okay, trustees, anything else? All right, I will then entertain a motion for executive session.
I move that we go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061B, D, and J. B, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student. D, to consider records that are exempt from disclosure as provided in Chapter 1, Title 74 Idaho Code. And J, to consider labor contract matter authorized under Section 74-2061A and B Idaho Code.
Second? Motion has been made and seconded. Roll call vote. Aye.
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 Aye.